Right now, you may be standing in the middle of your own life, staring at a patch of ground that feels entirely barren. It is that hollow, quiet ache that comes when you look at the seasons that have passed you by, and instead of seeing growth, you only see the empty space where you thought you should have bloomed. Maybe you have spent years pulling at the stubborn soil of your own spirit, convinced that if you just provided enough effort, enough light, or enough structure, you would finally see the harvest you were promised. But the orchard remains quiet, the branches stay thin, and at the end of a long day, when the sun retreats behind the mountains, you are left with a growing suspicion that you have somehow wasted your own seasons. You are lying in the cool, still air of your room, and perhaps you can feel the weight of this invisible harvest pressing down on your chest. It is not the kind of weight that bruises the skin. It is the weight of an unwritten history, the fatigue of having tried to force a harvest from soil that was never asked to be hurried. The window is cracked open, letting in the faint, sharp scent of damp earth and coming rain, and the shadows in the corner of your room are long and soft, moving almost imperceptibly as the night deepens. You don't need to reach for anything. You don't need to straighten your posture or compose your thoughts. Your body is allowed to be heavy, to sink into the sheets as if they were deep, undisturbed moss, and to stop the frantic, internal pacing that has been keeping your spirit upright all day. You are not broken because your branches are bare. You are not a failure because you have spent a season in the shade. What you are feeling right now is not the end of your story, and it is certainly not a proof of your inadequacy. It is the beginning of a different, deeper kind of wisdom. Tonight we will not try to force your mind into a frantic, bright blooming. We will not try to fix the orchard, or dig up the roots to see why they haven't produced, or measure your worth against the harvest of someone else's mountain. We will simply sit in the quiet. We will learn how to let the soil rest. Maybe you have felt this before, that strange, persistent guilt that arises whenever you stop moving. It is the fear that if you cease your labor, if you stop pruning the branches and checking the weather, the whole orchard will wither away. But here is the paradox that changes everything. The most fertile parts of the orchard are the ones that have been allowed to lie fallow. You believe that your value is tied to what you produce, to the fruit you can display, and to the speed with which you can cycle through the seasons of your life. Yet, the mountain understands something your mind has forgotten. It knows that growth is not a straight, vertical line. It is a slow, circular pulse. Sometimes, the most productive thing a tree can do is stop trying to fruit, and instead, pull its energy deep into the dark, silent center of its own roots. This is the great, overlooked truth of the orchard keeper. You have been treating your life as if it were a factory, demanding output regardless of the weather, and blaming yourself when the winter comes. But the winter is not a punishment. The fallow season is not a waste of your precious time. It is a vital, sacred necessity for everything that truly lasts. Your mind is exhausted because it has been trying to hold a permanent summer, and the heart only knows how to be at peace when it is finally permitted to experience the quiet of its own winter. If it feels right, take a slow breath. Let the air move through you, not to stimulate, not to awaken, but to acknowledge the space that is already here. Your hands, which have been holding the tools of your own correction all day, can finally lay them down on the floor. There is no need for them tonight. There is no need to count the failures or list the things you didn't finish. The mountain air is cooling. The light is dimming to a soft amber glow, and you are exactly where you need to be. You are in the dark, fertile space of your own internal orchard. Perhaps you came here tonight because you were tired of carrying the shame of your own stillness. Maybe you have been looking for an answer, a secret technique to make the buds open, or a way to justify the time you feel you have squandered. But the wisdom we are looking for is not found in a new, more effective way of working. It is found in the willingness to stop working entirely. It is found in the courage to let the ground stay empty, to let the branches remain bare, and to sit with the vulnerability of not knowing what the next season will bring. You have spent so much time being the gardener who is terrified of the frost. But what if the frost is exactly what the orchard needs to break the tough shells of your old intentions? What if the emptiness you see is not a void? but a vast open invitation to stop solving your life for a few hours. You don't have to decide who you are tonight. You don't have to define your value by what you will do tomorrow. You only have to exist here in the quiet, as the mountain is existing in the dark. Listen to the sound of the house around you. Listen to the way the quiet seems to be expanding, filling up the corners of your room. You might notice your mind trying to start a list, or trying to plan the morning, or trying to judge the way you are feeling. Notice how quickly that old habit returns. It wants to be the gardener, even in the dark. It wants to prune the thoughts before they can even settle. But you can simply observe that impulse. You don't have to join in. You don't have to give it the task. Just let the thought be a loose leaf falling toward the ground, spiraling slowly, landing without a sound. There is nothing to be gained by rushing the cycle. There is nothing to be lost by admitting that you are tired. Your life is not a race to reach the harvest, and you are not a failure because you have entered a period of quiet. You are an orchard, and you are in the middle of a very long, very deep, and very necessary season of replenishment. If the branches feel brittle, let them be brittle. If the ground feels cold, let it be cold. You are safe enough to soften. You are safe enough to stop. The orchard keeper knows that you cannot force the soil to be something other than what it is. You cannot command the seasons to turn. And yet, how many nights have you spent trying to do exactly that? How many times have you turned over the past in your mind, like a gardener obsessing over a plant that died years ago, wishing you could reach back and change the weather, or move the tree to a better spot? It is a heavy phantom labor. It is a way of spending your life force on a patch of earth that has already moved on. Tonight, we set down that phantom rake. We release the rusted shears. We do not need them here, in the deep silence of the mountain terrace. The orchard is already doing its work. It is taking in the night. It is drinking the stillness, and it is gathering the strength that only the darkness can provide. You don't have to guide this process. You don't have to watch over it. You don't have to worry about the yield. The earth knows how to hold its own secrets, and you, in the deepest part of your own being, know how to find your way back to that silence too. In a moment, we will look at the life of a keeper who tried to outrun the winter, and see how his struggle became the very thing that broke his peace. But for now, just feel the weight of your own existence, not as a burden to be carried, but as a presence that belongs in this room. You are not a guest in your own life. You are the mountain itself. You are the terrace. You are the soil. And you are the quiet that waits beneath the snow. Nothing else is required of you. No harvest is expected. The night is yours to inhabit, and the rest is yours to reclaim. You are allowed to be empty. You are allowed to be still. And in this stillness, the most important work of your life is already taking place. High on the northern spine of the mountain, where the air is thin and the light of the sun seems to stretch forever across the terraced slopes, there lived a man named Hideo. He was a keeper of the high orchards, a man whose hands were mapped by deep lines of dirt and rough bark. For as long as anyone in the valley could remember, Hideo was known for the impossible precision of his work. While others let their trees grow wild or leaned upon the rhythm of the rains, Hideo fought the mountain. He believed that a good keeper was one who never allowed a tree to fall behind. If the season was late, he brought heaters to the grove. If the branches grew heavy with unwanted leaves, he spent his nights with a rusted pruning saw, shaving away every sign of hesitation. He kept his tools in a small, stone-walled hut at the edge of the terrace. In the corner of this hut sat a heavy, clay basin. It was meant for catching the mountain mist, which would condense into clear water and drip drop by steady drop into the basin. This basin was his constant companion. He would often finish a long day of labor, his back aching and his mind still racing with the next day's plans, and sit before the clay pot to watch the water fill. To Hideo, the basin represented the perfect harvest. It was a vessel for time. He believed that if he could just fill that basin with enough clarity, if he could just measure the progress of his orchard by the depth of the water, he would finally be safe. One autumn, a strange and unseasonable drought settled over the peaks. The air became brittle. The soil began to crack into fine, hungry fissures. Hideo, driven by a panicked need to keep his trees from failing, began to work with a frantic, punishing energy. He spent his days hauling water from the lower springs, his lungs burning with the exertion. He pruned the trees until they looked like skeletal fingers reaching into the gray sky. He wanted to force them to conserve their strength, to push all their vitality into the fruit, to defy the drought. He was not merely working. He was waging a war against the season, convinced that if he showed enough devotion, the mountain would have to yield to his will. One evening, exhausted and trembling with the onset of fever, Hideo sat in his hut. The clay basin was nearly dry. Only a thin, muddy sediment remained at the bottom. He stared at it, his throat parched, his heart hammering against his ribs. He had done everything. He had pushed every tree to its limit, yet the orchard looked more desolate than it ever had in its history. The leaves were gray and brittle, curling into themselves like dried paper. He felt a sudden, sharp surge of resentment, not just against the drought, but against the trees themselves for not responding to his sacrifice. An elderly woman, a traveler who had spent many years wandering the mountain paths, appeared in the doorway of the hut. She carried only a walking stick and a small, empty gourd. She did not speak. She simply watched Hideo as he stared into the empty clay basin. She saw the way his fingers were white from gripping the edge of the stone table. She saw the way his eyes were hollowed out by the fear of being seen as a failure. She walked to the center of the hut and set her gourd down. She reached out and touched the clay basin, tracing the rim with a slow, calloused finger. Hideo looked up, his voice raspy and thin. He explained that he had failed. He told her that he had poured every ounce of his life into these trees, that he had pruned away every flaw, and that the mountain had rewarded him with nothing but dust. He pointed to the empty basin. He said that even the sky had stopped giving him water, and that his life felt as dry and useless as the bottom of that pot. The woman looked at the basin, then at the skeletal trees visible through the doorway, then back at Hideo. She asked him a single question. She wondered what would happen if he stopped trying to measure his life by the water in the pot. She did not wait for an answer. She picked up his rusted pruning saw, which had been left on the floor, and she handed it to him. She asked him to go outside and put the saw back into the shed. She told him that the trees had forgotten how to listen to the seasons because he had been shouting at them for too long. She moved to the hearth and began to stir the embers, as if she were a guest who had been expected for a very long time. Hideo felt a strange, cold clarity wash over him. He did not want to leave the hut. He wanted to argue. He wanted to explain the complexity of his labor, the necessity of the pruning, the morality of his struggle. But the woman's presence was like the arrival of the cold mountain wind. It took the heat out of his anger. He stood up, his legs heavy and uncooperative, and walked to the door. He looked out at the orchard. In the moonlight, the trees appeared twisted and tortured. He had pruned them so severely that they looked like they were screaming. For the first time, he did not see the potential fruit he had lost. He saw the pain he had inflicted. He walked to the shed, his boots crunching on the dry, brittle earth. He opened the door and placed the saw on the high shelf, tucked behind a bundle of old, dried vines. He did not look back. He returned to the hut and sat down on the floor, some distance from the hearth. He felt a sudden, profound desire to simply stop. He felt the tension in his shoulders beginning to loosen, not because the drought had ended, but because he had finally ceased the fight. The woman was still sitting by the hearth. She had placed a single piece of wood on the coals, and the smell of cedar began to fill the small stone room. She didn't look at him. She just said that the orchard was not a factory, and the keeper was not a master of the seasons. She said that a garden that is never allowed to be empty can never learn how to be full. She pointed to the clay basin again. She said that as long as he insisted on checking the depth of the water, he would never be able to drink the rain when it finally arrived. Hideo sat in the dim amber light and watched the shadows play on the stone walls. He felt the ache in his muscles, the fatigue in his spirit, and for the first time he did not label these feelings as failures. They were just the physical record of his long, unnecessary struggle. He closed his eyes. The room was quiet. The only sound was the faint, dry scratching of the branches against the hut wall outside. He was still the keeper of the orchard, but he was no longer the one who had to save it. It is interesting, is it not, to consider the weight Hideo was carrying. He was not just carrying the weight of his daily labor. He was carrying the weight of an identity he had built out of the drought and the harvest. He believed that he was the cause of the orchard's life. He believed that if he stopped working, the world would stop turning. And how often have you felt that same crushing responsibility? How often have you looked at the empty basin of your own day and blamed yourself for the lack of water, as if the weather were a choice you had made, or a result of your own lack of devotion? The woman did not tell him that everything would be perfect by morning. She did not promise him that the drought would break, or that the trees would suddenly burst into bloom. She only told him that his current way of being was a form of blindness. She showed him that the very tools he used to secure his future were the ones that were cutting him off from the present. The pruning saw, the constant monitoring of the basin, the frantic movement between the springs and the terraces. These were the bars of his cage, and the cage was so small that he had forgotten the mountain was still there, vast and indifferent to his efforts. You might be wondering what this means for your own life, for the patches of ground you feel have been left barren, for the seasons you think you have squandered. The lesson of the orchard is not about becoming a better gardener. It is not about finding a more efficient way to prune the branches of your own spirit. It is about understanding that you are not the one who decides when the winter begins, and you are not the one who decides when the spring returns. You are a part of the orchard, not the owner of it. Think about the silence that filled the hut when Hideo finally stopped talking. Think about the way the air shifted when he finally sat down, his hands empty, his work abandoned on the shelf. The drought had not ended. His orchard was still dying, and yet the room was full of a peace he hadn't known in years. He had finally allowed himself to be a person who was allowed to rest. He had finally stopped using his suffering as a sign that he was doing something wrong, and started seeing it as a sign that he was trying to hold the whole mountain on his back. You don't have to solve the orchard tonight. You don't have to figure out how to bring the water back or how to save the trees you feel you have neglected. You only have to recognize the pruning saw in your own hand. You only have to notice the basin you are constantly measuring, and the way your heart tightens when you see that it is not yet full. You are here in the dark, and you are safe enough to set the tool down. You are safe enough to let the basin stay empty for a while. The mountain is large, the night is long, and the earth is perfectly capable of holding the orchard while you finally take a breath. Consider the clay basin once more. It was made to catch the mist, to store the potential of the sky. But it was only a vessel. It was not the source. You have been treating yourself like the source, trying to manufacture life out of your own exhaustion. But you are also a vessel. You are here to receive, to hold, and to allow the seasons to pass through you. When you stop clutching the rim of the basin, when you stop demanding that it be full, you become something much larger. You become the space that can hold the drought, the space that can hold the rain, and the space that can hold the quiet, dark peace of a mountain orchard under the stars. The wind outside is picking up, a soft, dry rustle against the eaves of the hut. It is the same wind that has been blowing for 1,000 years. It doesn't care if the trees are fruit-bearing or bare. It doesn't care if the basin is filled with water or mud. It is just the wind, and you are just the person sitting in the dark, listening to the world exist without your constant interference. This is not a failure of character. It is an act of profound, quiet sanity. In a moment, we will look at why the mind finds it so difficult to trust this emptiness, and why we have been trained to believe that if we are not pruning the branches, we are being lazy. But for now, just let the story settle into your bones like the cool mountain air. You are not the keeper of the drought. You are not the master of the harvest. You are the quiet witness of your own life, and you are doing exactly what is needed by simply being still. Feel the floor beneath you. It is firm, steady, and ancient. It is the same earth that supports the trees, the hut, and the mountain. It does not demand that you produce anything tonight. It only asks that you rest. You can let go of the saw. You can let go of the basin. You can let go of the need to be the one who saves the grove. The orchard is already waiting, and the roots are deeper than you know. You are resting in a place where the seasons are held in balance, and you are finally free to be the person who watches the night, rather than the person who has to fix it. The story of the orchard keeper is not a request for you to abandon the things you love, or to stop tending to the tasks that matter. It is not telling you that your efforts are foolish, or that you should become a hollow shell of indifference. Instead, it points toward a much quieter realization. Think about the way Hideo suffered. His agony was not just caused by the drought, or by the thinning of the trees, or even by the lack of water in his basin. A great deal of his exhaustion came from the way he interpreted these events. He took the reality of a difficult season, and he layered it with a heavy, thick blanket of judgment, fear, and personal blame. When the mountain stayed dry, he didn't just see a lack of rain, he saw a lack of worthiness. When the trees turned brittle, he didn't just see a change in the season. He saw his own failure etched into the landscape. This is how the mind turns a simple, painful event into a long, drawn-out war. It is what happens when we refuse to let the present moment be exactly what it is, and instead demand that it fulfill the impossible script we have written for it. We think that if we care enough, if we worry enough, if we prune every mistake with enough intensity, we can force the world to be a garden of perpetual summer. But Buddhist wisdom suggests that we have this backward. We think that peace is something we must build through constant, frantic manipulation of our circumstances. We believe that if we just monitor our life with enough vigilance, watching the basin for every drop, checking the trees for every sign of browning, we will eventually be safe from the inevitable shifts of the seasons. Yet, this vigilance is not a shield. It is the very source of the ache you feel in your chest right now. By trying to keep the orchard in a state of static perfection, Hideo was effectively cutting himself off from the reality of the mountain. He was so busy fighting the drought that he forgot how to live within it. You might be wondering how you can possibly live without this constant vigilance. You might feel that if you stop trying to control every outcome, everything you value will simply drift away or fall into ruin. This is the great fear of the gardener. It is the fear that if you put down the saw, the orchard will vanish. But look closely at the insight hidden in the woman's question. She was not telling him that the drought was unimportant. She was telling him that his response to the drought was the true source of his exhaustion. She was pointing to the fact that when we treat our life like a project that can be perfected, we lose the ability to inhabit the life that is actually happening. When we talk about letting go, we are not talking about apathy. We are talking about the freedom to see things as they are, without the constant draining labor of painting them to look like something else. You can still care for your orchard. You can still work the soil and tend the branches, but you can do it without the frantic belief that the rain is a reward for your goodness, or that the drought is a punishment for your inadequacy. When you stop turning every difficulty into a reflection of your own value, the weight of the work changes entirely. It is no longer a battle for survival. It becomes simply the work of the season. Think of the way Hideo measured his life by the water in that clay basin. How many times have you done the same thing? Using some external marker, a goal reached, a person's approval, a feeling of constant productivity, to measure whether or not your life is valid. And what happens when that marker is low? What happens when the basin is nearly dry, or the trees are looking tired, or the harvest feels light? Your mind instantly concludes that the problem is you. It tells you that you should have done more, tried harder, or been smarter. It adds a layer of sharp, self-inflicted shame on top of the original unavoidable difficulty of the season. This is the second wound. The first wound is the drought itself, which is simply a fact of nature. It is the reality of a difficult situation. But the second wound is the voice that tells you that you are responsible for the drought, and that if you were a better person, the sky would have opened up for you. This second wound is entirely made of thoughts. It is a story you are telling yourself about your own worth. And because it is just a story, it is possible to stop telling it. It is possible to see the drought without the blame. You are not being asked to stop feeling the pain of a hard season. If the orchard is struggling, it is natural to feel a sense of loss or concern. That is a human response. But there is a massive difference between feeling the difficulty of a moment and building an identity out of it. There is a profound difference between saying, "The season is hard," and saying, "I am a failure because the season is hard." The first statement is a recognition of reality. The second is an act of self-violence. The wisdom of the terrace is that it allows the season to be whatever it needs to be. In the spring it blooms. In the summer, it bears fruit. In the autumn, it turns golden, and in the winter, it lies dormant, exposed to the cold, stripped of its leaves, appearing to the untrained eye as if it has given up. But the mountain knows the truth. The dormant season is not a waste. It is a vital period of gathering, a time when the energy that once went into producing fruit is redirected into the roots. Without this time of apparent emptiness, the tree could never survive the next cycle of growth. You have been judging your own dormant seasons as if they were evidence of your incompetence. You have been looking at your moments of rest and calling them laziness, or looking at your moments of uncertainty and calling them signs of fragility. But what if your current period of stillness is not a failure of productivity, but a necessary deepening of your own roots? What if the reason you feel so tired is not because you are weak, but because you have been trying to bloom during a season that required you to rest? This is the heart of the matter. We are so terrified of being perceived as unproductive that we fight the natural cycle of our own humanity. We want the fruit, always the fruit. We want the constant validation of visible growth. But look at the mountain. Does the mountain worry about its harvest? Does the earth blame itself for the winter? The natural world operates with a kind of profound, unconscious trust in its own necessity. It knows that each phase of the cycle serves the whole. It knows that the darkness is just as essential as the light. When you bring this understanding into your own heart, something begins to shift. The pressure to force your life into a permanent, vibrant bloom starts to dissipate. You realize that you don't have to prove your worth through the speed of your transformation. You are allowed to take your time. You are allowed to be in a season of quiet, in a season of repair, or even in a season of letting things fall away. These are not signs that you have lost your way. They are signs that you are finally beginning to understand the rhythm of your own soul. You do not need to do anything to earn this permission. You do not need to demonstrate that you have been productive enough to warrant a break. The mountain does not ask the trees to earn the winter. The earth does not require a report of your achievements before it allows you to rest. You are a living part of this cycle, and your need for rest is just as natural, just as important, and just as sacred as your need for activity. Consider the clay basin once more. If you stop trying to measure your life by it, you become free to look at the sky. You become free to look at the trees as they are, rather than as they should be. You become free to see the drought without the stinging, cold needle of self-judgment. This is the shift from being the master of the orchard to being a participant in the mountain's life. And it is a transition that is available to you in every single breath. The next time you find yourself gripped by the fear that you are falling behind, or that you are not doing enough, pause. Feel the weight of that thought in your body. Notice how it tightens your jaw and quickens your breath. This is not you. This is the second wound. This is the story of the gardener who thinks he is the one holding up the sky. Breathe into that tightness. Let it be there, but do not obey it. Do not let it dictate your value. Instead, simply say to yourself, this is a season. It is not the whole story. I am allowed to rest. You might find that your mind wants to fight this. It will offer you 1,000 reasons why you must keep working, keep worrying, and keep trying to force the harvest. It will tell you that the stakes are too high, or that you are simply not allowed to be still. Let the mind talk. Let it say whatever it needs to say. But do not pick up the pruning saw. Do not go back to the hut to check the basin. Stay here in the quiet and let the truth of the mountain settle around you. You are not being asked to change your life overnight. You are being asked to change your relationship with the life you are already living. You are being asked to see the orchard with the eyes of a person who has finally stopped waging war against the seasons. You are being invited to accept the drought, to accept the winter, and to accept the fact that your worth has never depended on the fruit you produce. As the night deepens, you can feel the orchard settling into a profound, dark rest. The trees are not worrying about the morning. The ground is not anxious about the rain. Everything is exactly as it is, and for now that is enough. You have done the work of being present, and that is a task that carries its own silent reward. Let the thoughts about tomorrow drift away. They have no place in the winter of the heart. You are safe here, you are grounded here, and you are perfectly, quietly enough. In a moment, We will explore how to practice this stillness in your own body, not by forcing yourself to be still, but by noticing the quiet that is already waiting beneath the noise. You don't need to reach for it. You don't need to grasp it. It is the very ground you are standing upon. And just like the roots of the trees in winter, you can feel yourself sinking deeper into the earth, gathering strength, and letting go of everything that no longer serves the truth of your own life. You are not losing anything by resting. You are only coming back to the place where you began. Now that the story of Hideo and the empty basin is resting in your mind, we can begin to bring this wisdom into the quiet, dark space of your own body. You do not need to do anything special. You do not need to try to be calm or to force your mind to stop its drifting. Just allow yourself to be exactly as you are. If your thoughts are still busy, let them be busy. You are not trying to stop the season. You are only learning how to sit within it. Take a slow, gentle breath, and as you do, notice the weight of your body against the mattress. Feel the way the bed rises to meet you, supporting every inch of your frame without asking for anything in return. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears, releasing the invisible tension you have been carrying all day. Your jaw can unclench, your eyes can soften in their sockets, and your hands can finally rest, open and empty. Beside you, there is no task left to complete, and there is no harvest you are required to oversee. If it feels right, bring your awareness to the space in your chest where you usually feel the tightening of worry. Maybe it feels like a knot, or a cold stone, or a hollow ache. You do not need to change it, you only need to notice it. Imagine for a moment that this area is like the clay basin in the mountain hut. It is a vessel built to hold the experiences of your life, but it has become clogged with the sediment of your own judgment. You have been trying to fill it with clarity, with answers, and with proof of your own worth. But the water of peace cannot settle when the vessel is constantly being shaken. Imagine that you can reach into your own mind and gently take the worry that has been bothering you today. Perhaps it is a specific mistake you keep replaying, or a fear about something you cannot control. Give this worry a shape, see it clearly, but keep it at a distance as if you are holding it in the palm of your hand. You do not need to solve it. You do not need to analyze why it happened. Just hold the thought and watch it for a moment, as if it were a simple, ordinary pebble. Now, picture that heavy, weathered clay basin from Hideo's hut sitting on a flat, cool stone in front of you. Take that worry, that thought you have been clutching so tightly, and place it gently into the basin. You are not throwing it away. You are not pretending it does not exist. You are simply giving it a place to rest, so that your own heart does not have to be the one carrying it. You are letting the sediment settle. As the worry sits in the basin, observe how your body reacts. Do you feel a momentary urge to reach back in and grab it? Do you feel a sudden, sharp panic at the thought of leaving it there unattended? This is the gardener's habit. It is the reflexive, automatic movement of a mind that has been taught that to stop holding is to fail. Notice that urge. Smile at it if you can. It is just a story. It is just the habit of the pruner, but you do not have to follow it. Take another slow, deep breath and feel the air fill the space where the worry used to be. You are not becoming empty in a way that feels lonely. You are becoming spacious. You are creating room for the night air to circulate, for the stillness to enter, and for the mountain to support you. You are learning that you can set the work down, even if only for a few minutes, without the world falling into ruin. If your mind wanders away, as it surely will, do not be harsh with yourself. A drifting mind is not a sign of failure. It is simply a mind that is used to walking. When you notice that you have left the basin and returned to the garden, just bring your awareness back to the breath. Gently acknowledge that you were thinking, and then, with the same softness you would show a tired child, return your attention to the feeling of the night air on your skin. You can return to this place of rest as many times as you need. There is no limit to the number of times you can practice letting go. Feel the way the silence in the room seems to wrap around you. It is a protective, ancient silence. It has been here long before your worries arrived, and it will be here long after they have dissolved into the past. You are tucked safely into this silence. You are held by the earth that supports your home. You do not need to be the keeper of the harvest, and you do not need to be the master of the drought. You are allowed to be a person who is simply breathing in the dark. As you lie here, feel the sensation of the sheets against your skin. Notice the temperature of the air, the subtle rise and fall of your abdomen, the quiet, steady rhythm of your own heart. This is the truth of your existence. This is the reality that remains when the stories are set aside. You are made of the same cycles as the mountain. You are made of the same deep, slow time. The restlessness you feel is just the weather of the mind. It is not the mountain itself. If you find that your hands are still twitching, or that your feet are restless, imagine that you are sinking into deep, warm sand. Each time you exhale, feel yourself melting an inch further into the mattress. You are giving up the need to maintain your position, the need to protect your status, and the need to be anything other than a person resting in the dark. The basin is still sitting there, quiet and cool, holding the weight of your thoughts so that you don't have to. You are not losing your grip on your life. You are gaining a new, more spacious way of inhabiting it. There is a natural intelligence in the soil that knows how to replenish itself. It doesn't need to be lectured on the value of rest. It doesn't need to be reminded that a fallow season is coming. It just knows. And your body, which has been working so hard to protect you, knows this too. It is reaching for rest not because it is lazy, but because it is wise. Trust that wisdom. Allow your body to sink into the dark, fertile support of the night. Think of the way a tree roots itself more deeply during the winter. It stops pushing upward, stops trying to expand, and instead it sends its energy down into the cold, hidden dark. It gathers, it listens, it becomes solid. You are doing the same thing right now. By stopping the pursuit of the fruit, you are allowing your roots to find the steady, deep center of your own life. You are becoming grounded in a way that no external success could ever provide. You are safe here. Nothing is going to happen if you let go for tonight. The world will keep turning. The sun will rise, and the orchard will wait for you in the morning. But for now, you are permitted to exist in the quiet. You are permitted to leave the basin exactly where it is. You are permitted to be exactly as tired as you are. There is a deep, profound healing in this admission. There is a mountain of relief in the realization that you were never the one who had to hold the orchard up. Stay with this feeling of settling. Let the awareness of your own body become a soft, warm glow. If a new thought appears, offer it a place in the basin, and then return to the feeling of your own breath. You are not trying to reach a state of perfect emptiness. You are simply practicing the art of being a witness to your own life, rather than the frantic keeper of its results. You are learning to trust the quiet, and in doing so, you are learning to trust yourself. You are doing exactly what is needed, and that is a beauty beyond words. Years after Hideo's encounter in the hut, he was no longer the man who patrolled the orchard with a pruning saw as if it were a weapon. He had grown old, and his steps were slower, but there was a quiet steadiness to his presence that the mountain seemed to mirror. He still lived in the same stone hut, and the same clay basin still sat upon the table. But he no longer watched it for water. He used it to hold the fallen petals of the plum blossoms that drifted in through the open door during the spring. He had stopped asking the mountain to be anything other than what it was, and in doing so, he had found that he could finally inhabit the seasons of his own life without the constant, burning need to justify them. However, the mind is a subtle thing. Even when we have learned to set down the saw, we often find new ways to carry the weight of our own expectations. In the valley below the orchard, there lived a young apprentice named Kenji. Kenji was a man of great talent, a weaver who spent his days at a loom, creating intricate tapestries of silk. But Kenji was haunted by the same shadow that had once lived inside Hideo. He felt that his life was not yet a masterpiece. He looked at the tapestries he created, and instead of seeing the beauty of the thread, he only saw the tiny, inevitable knots where the patterns shifted. He felt that he was falling behind in his craft, that he was wasting his time on patterns that were not meaningful enough, and that he had to force his hands to be perfect. Kenji traveled up the mountain to seek Hideo, having heard rumors of the orchard keeper, who had found a way to work without the fever of the mind. When Kenji arrived, he found Hideo sitting on the terrace, watching a layer of Latotum mist move across the slope. Kenji spoke quickly, his words rushing out in a breathless tumble. He told Hideo about his loom, his knots, and his terrifying certainty that he was wasting his life because his work wasn't yet the perfect representation of his potential. He expected Hideo to offer him a new technique or a secret meditative method to master his anxiety. He expected a solution that would make him faster, better, and more satisfied with his own output. Hideo listened in silence, not with the sharp, judging gaze of a master, but with the patient, unhurried attention of the earth itself. When Kenji finally stopped speaking, his breath ragged and his eyes wet with the frustration of his own perceived inadequacy, Hideo didn't answer immediately. He stood up and gestured for Kenji to follow him to a section of the orchard that had been left untouched for many years. It was a place where the trees had grown in wild, crooked shapes, their branches weaving together in patterns that were neither efficient nor uniform. They were not productive in the way a managed orchard should be, but they were deeply, undeniably alive. Hideo picked up a small, weathered stone from the ground and handed it to Kenji. It was a common gray river rock, worn smooth by time and the patient work of water. He asked Kenji to hold the stone and tell him if it was a failure because it was not a gemstone or a piece of polished jade. Kenji looked at the stone, then at the gnarled, beautiful chaos of the orchard, and he started to say that a stone has no responsibility to be anything other than a stone. But as the words left his lips, he hesitated. He saw the shift in his own thought. He had been applying a different set of rules to the stone than he was applying to his own life. Hideo pointed to a place where two branches had grown into each other, creating a strange, natural knot that looked almost like a tangle in a tapestry. He explained that the tree didn't worry about the knot. It didn't stop growing or curse the wind or try to undo the past. It simply used the knot as a point of leverage to grow even stronger in a new direction. He told Kenji that the knots in his tapestries were not mistakes. They were the places where his life was learning to grow around the challenges of the human experience. He said that the weaver who fears the knot is a person who has forgotten that life is not a flat, perfect cloth, but a living, shifting, three-dimensional presence. Kenji felt a sudden, quiet ache in his chest. It was not the sharp, hot pain of anxiety, but a deep, cool recognition of his own unnecessary struggle. He realized that for his entire life, he had been trying to weave a tapestry that had no knots, trying to create a version of himself that never felt tired, never felt uncertain, and never made a mistake. He had been trying to weave the air, forgetting that the silk itself requires the tension of the loom. He looked at the stone in his hand, then at the tangled orchard, and he did something he had never done before. He didn't ask Hideo for a better way to weave. He didn't ask how to get rid of the knots. He just let out a long, slow breath and he closed his eyes. He didn't become enlightened in that moment. The fear of being behind didn't vanish, and the perfectionist in his mind didn't retire. But the character of his struggle shifted. When he opened his eyes, he looked at his own hands, calloused from the thread, and for the first time, he felt a sense of gratitude for the work they had done. He wasn't a master weaver. He was a person who was learning, and that was enough. He didn't need to be the person who finished the grandest tapestry in the valley. He just needed to be the person who sat at the loom, present with the thread in his hand. He stayed on the mountain for 3 days, not to learn a new technique, but to watch how Hideo spent his time. He saw that Hideo worked, he rested, he ate, and he slept, and in each activity he was fully present, without the internal commentary of a critic constantly assessing the results. Kenji saw that Hideo didn't care if the orchard looked perfect to a visitor. He only cared that he was tending it with attention. When Kenji finally packed his bag to return to the valley, he felt a strange lightness in his feet. He knew the work of the loom was still waiting for him, and he knew the knots would still appear, but he also knew that he could stop using the loom as a mirror for his own failure. He returned to his hut, sat down at his loom, and picked up the silk thread. When he reached a place where the pattern needed to shift, where a knot was inevitable, he stopped, he breathed. He felt the tension in his fingers, acknowledged the urge to be perfect, and then, instead of pulling the thread with panicked force, he loosened his grip. He wove the knot into the design, accepting it as part of the structure. It wasn't the perfect tapestry he had originally envisioned, but as he stepped back, he saw that it had a beauty he had never achieved before. It was a tapestry that held the reality of the weaver. This small, Subtle transformation is what the mountain teaches. Kenji did not become a different man. He didn't escape the pressure of the valley or the limitations of his own mind. He simply learned to work with the knots instead of against them. And you can do this too. You don't have to be a master of inner peace, and you don't have to have your life perfectly aligned to the patterns you once imagined for yourself. You only have to stop treating your knots as if they are evidence of a life gone wrong. Think about the places in your own life where you have been trying to force a knot out of the tapestry. Maybe it is in your career, where you feel you haven't reached the milestones you set for yourself. Maybe it is in a relationship, where you keep replaying the moments you wish you had handled differently. Maybe it is in your internal landscape, where you keep criticizing yourself for being tired, for being unsure, or for needing time to rest. These are your knots, and they are not mistakes. They are the record of your growth. They are the places where you have met the world and tried to navigate its complexity. You don't need to undo them. You don't need to hide them. You just need to stop pulling at the thread with such desperate, fearful intensity. When you stop pulling, you begin to see that the pattern is much larger than you realized. You begin to see that your life is not a product to be sold, but a practice to be lived. You are the weaver, and you are also the thread. And the tapestry is unfolding exactly as it must, one breath at a time. This is the deeper insight of the Zen tradition. It does not promise to take away the difficulty. It promises to take away the resistance to it. When Kenji was fighting the knots, he was suffering twice. Once because the knot was there, and once because he was ashamed that he couldn't prevent it. But when he accepted the knot, he was only dealing with the knot itself. And a knot, when treated with patience and skill, can be woven into a design of surprising strength and depth. You are doing this right now simply by listening. You are acknowledging that your life has knots. You are admitting that you have been trying to force your own seasons. You are seeing that the struggle you feel is not a sign of your unworthiness, but a result of your own dedication to a vision that was never meant to be static. This is the quiet turning point. This is the moment where you put down the pruning saw. Not because the orchard is saved, but because you have finally realized that you belong to the mountain, regardless of the harvest. As the night continues to settle, feel the weight of this truth in your body. It is a cooling, grounding feeling. It doesn't ask you to be happy, or to be productive, or to be anything other than a person who is present with the thread in their hand. If the mind drifts back to the knots, if it starts to recount the times you have felt behind or barren, let it happen. But don't follow the story. Don't go back to the loom of the past to try to unpick what has already been woven. Just sit here, in the dark, and breathe. There is nothing to be fixed tonight. The knots will be there in the morning, but they will look different. They will look like parts of a tapestry you are finally learning to love. They will look like the evidence of a life that has been lived with effort and care. And that is a beautiful, sacred thing. You are not a failure for having been imperfect. You are a human being who is learning how to weave in the light of the present moment. And that is all that has ever been required of you. You can let go of the pressure to be the master weaver tonight. You can let the thread lie still. You can stop counting the knots and start feeling the texture of the silk. You are safe enough to stop performing. You are safe enough to stop justifying. You are in the orchard. The mountain is silent and the night is deep. Everything else can wait. The tapestry will still be there, and you will be ready to weave it when the morning comes. For now, just allow the rhythm of the mountain to become the rhythm of your own heart. Slow, steady, and perfectly content to be exactly where it is. It is time to look more closely at the machinery of the mind that keeps us trapped in this cycle of exhaustion. Think of your life as a terraced orchard on a steep mountain slope. The weather that comes, the drought, the frost, the sudden rains. This is simply the nature of the mountain. You cannot command the clouds to stop, and you cannot demand that the winter be warmer than it is. This is the first kind of pain. It is the raw, unavoidable friction of living in a world that is always changing, always moving, and always beyond your total control. It is the ache of a season that feels empty, or the frustration of a project that doesn't yield the fruit you expected. But then, consider the second kind of pain. This is the pain you add yourself. It is the internal reaction to the weather. It is the frantic, desperate belief that if you were only a better gardener, the drought would never have happened. It is the cold, sharp judgment that tells you your worth is tied to the harvest. So if the trees are bare, you must be a failure. This second layer is not forced upon you by the mountain. It is built by your own thoughts, stone by stone, until it becomes a heavy wall that blocks out the very sunlight you are trying to save. This is the mechanism of resistance. When you feel a difficult emotion, such as anxiety about your future or shame regarding your past, your mind does not simply sit with the feeling. It immediately tries to prune it, to fix it, or to run away from it. You start rehearsing the future, trying to predict and control every possible outcome to avoid the discomfort of uncertainty. You replay the past, analyzing old mistakes with a microscopic focus, as if you could somehow edit the history of your orchard from the inside of your own head. You look for external approval to prove you are doing enough, and when that approval doesn't come, you internalize the silence as a verdict on your character. This is why you feel so tired. You are doing the work of the seasons, and simultaneously you are doing the work of a second, internal judge who is never satisfied with the results. You are exhausted not just by the challenges of your life, but by the endless, exhausting effort of trying to convince yourself that those challenges shouldn't be there. You treat your own pain as an enemy to be defeated, or a failure to be hidden, and in that process, you turn your entire inner life into a site of conflict. But here is the breakthrough of the mountain path. Peace is not the absence of the drought. Peace is not the guarantee of a bountiful harvest. Peace is the act of dropping the tools of resistance. It is the courage to admit that you are, in fact, experiencing a difficult season without the need to blame yourself for it. When you stop fighting the reality of the present, you stop wasting your life force on the second, self-inflicted wound. You are left only with the first, and that is a reality that you are fully equipped to navigate, moment by moment. Think of the way a tree stands in the winter. It does not try to fight the frost. It does not try to force itself to bloom while the ground is frozen. It simply accepts the reality of the season and turns its energy inward, toward its own roots. It trusts the cycle. It doesn't need to justify its state of dormancy to anyone. It doesn't need to perform for the mountain to prove it is still a tree. It just is. And in that simple, undefended state of being, it is perfectly secure. You have spent so much of your life trying to perform for an audience that doesn't exist. You have been checking your worth by the fruit on the branches, when your true life is happening in the silence of the roots. Every time you feel that pull toward control, that urge to fix your life, that fear that you are falling behind, you are witnessing the second wound in action. You are seeing the gardener who is afraid of the winter, and you have the power to simply notice that. You have the power to say, "This is the habit of the gardener, but I do not have to obey it." When you catch yourself replaying the past, or rehearsing the future, or feeling that sharp, cold sting of shame, don't try to force the thoughts to stop. That would only be another form of control. Instead, treat those thoughts like the dry, fallen leaves of autumn. They are just debris from the seasons that have passed. You don't have to sweep them up. You don't have to keep them in a pile. You can just let them rest where they have fallen. Your only job is to return your attention to the current moment, to the feeling of the breath in your lungs, and to the ground beneath you. This is how we change our relationship with suffering. We don't try to change the weather. We change our stance within it. When the rain comes, we stop complaining that the sun isn't shining. We simply notice the rain. We feel the dampness. We acknowledge the temperature. We take the steps we need to take. But we do so without the extra heavy baggage of our own resistance. We move through the world, not as masters of the orchard, but as participants in the dance of the mountain. Does this feel heavy? Does it feel like something you aren't sure you can do? That is natural. The mind is a creature of habit, and it has been trained for years to look for threats and to demand perfection. It wants to know that everything is going to be all right, and it believes that the only way to ensure this is through constant, vigilant control. But look at the evidence of your own life. Has all that vigilance ever brought you true, lasting peace? Has all that pruning ever made the winter go away? You already know the answer. You have been carrying this saw for a long time, and you know how heavy it has become. You know how it has kept you from sleeping, from breathing, and from feeling the quiet joy of simply being alive. Tonight you are being invited to put it down, not because you are giving up on your life, but because you are finally realizing that your life does not need to be pruned into submission to be worthy of your love. You are a mountain orchard. You have your seasons of growth and your seasons of rest. You have your days of abundance and your days of apparent scarcity. All of this belongs to you. None of it is a mistake. When you stop fighting the reality of your current season, you reclaim the energy that has been stolen by your own resistance. You finally have the strength to be where you are, rather than where your mind keeps insisting you should be. There is a profound, quiet beauty in this. It is the beauty of a tree that is not trying to be a flower. It is the beauty of a person who is not trying to be a memory or a projection of a future success. It is the beauty of right now. And right now, the only thing you are asked to do is to be present. You don't have to solve the drought. You don't have to explain the knots in your tapestry. You only have to exist in the quiet space where these things are allowed to be, without you having to define them or evidence them. As we continue, let this realization sink deep into the soil of your own heart. You are not the keeper who must save the orchard. You are the mountain itself. You are the vast, immovable support for everything that happens on your slopes. You are the space that holds the seasons, the weather, and the trees. And in that space there is nothing that needs to be fixed. There is only the quiet, steady pulse of life, and the permission to finally, deeply, rest. Notice how your body feels as you hear these words. Is there a part of you that wants to argue? Is there a part of you that says, "But what if I lose everything if I stop fighting?" Let that voice speak. It is just the old gardener, scared of the frost. It is a part of you that has been trying to protect you in the only way it knows how. Thank it for its concern, and then kindly let it know that you are safe. You have the wisdom of the mountain now. You have the knowledge that the cycle is stronger than any effort you could make to force it. You are safe enough to let go. You are safe enough to let the basin sit empty. You are safe enough to let the night be dark, and the winter be cold, and the trees be bare. These are not signs of failure. They are the signs of a life that is being lived with depth, with honesty, and with a courage that is far greater than the courage of a gardener who only knows how to force the bloom. You are doing the work that matters most. You are learning how to be at home in your own heart, and that is a sanctuary that no drought can ever touch. You are already beginning to see how this mountain orchard, with its cycles of drought and bloom, lives within you. The wisdom of the terrace is not meant to be kept in a book or practiced only during moments of deep, meditative silence. It is meant to be carried into the valley, into the noise of your ordinary daily life. It is meant to walk with you when the pace is fast, when the demands are high, and when your mind feels like it is being pulled in a dozen directions at once. Consider the times in your day when you find yourself reaching for a sense of control that simply is not there. Maybe you are sitting in the quiet of your home, and you find yourself obsessively checking your phone, waiting for a message that will tell you everything is okay, or waiting for a sign that your worth is recognized. Notice the feeling of that wait. It is a form of pruning. It is a way of trying to manage the harvest before the season has even arrived. In that moment, when the impulse to check arises, can you pause? Can you feel the tension in your hands, the slight tightening in your chest, and just breathe? You don't have to put the phone down if it feels like a safety line, but you can acknowledge the act for what it is. You are the orchard keeper who has momentarily forgotten that the mountain doesn't need your monitoring to continue its work. Or think about the times when you lie awake in the dark, your mind running through the corridors of the past, replaying a mistake or a conversation that you wish had ended differently. You are walking through the orchard with a rusted blade in your hand, trying to cut away the branches that have already grown, trying to shape the wood that has already hardened. It is a phantom labor. It is a way of spending your internal life force on a season that has long since passed into the history of the mountain. When you notice this happening, do not fight the thought. Do not tell yourself that you are bad for thinking it. Instead, name it. Tell yourself. This is the gardener trying to prune the ghost of a winter tree. The simple act of naming the pattern creates a space between you and the thought. It reminds you that the thought is an event passing through your mind, not a command you are required to obey. Maybe you find yourself comparing your life to the lives of others, feeling the familiar ache of being behind, as if you are a tree that has failed to produce fruit while all the other trees in the valley are overflowing. You look at their harvest, you look at your own, and you feel the shame of the empty branches. But how can you know the mountain of another person? How can you know what droughts they have endured, what frosts have touched their roots, or what deep hidden work they are doing in the dark? You are not them, and your life is not a competition to reach a certain level of bloom by a certain time. You are exactly where your own season requires you to be. Your dormancy is not a defect, it is a necessity. Even when you are at work, or in the middle of a difficult conversation, or trying to manage the responsibilities of your day, you can practice this quiet surrender. You can care deeply about your work without gripping the outcome so tightly that it chokes your spirit. You can be dedicated, focused, and present, all while knowing that the ultimate success of your orchard is not solely in your hands. This is the secret of the master gardener. It is the ability to do the work with full attention, while simultaneously leaving space for the mountain to breathe. You may find yourself feeling guilty for resting, as if you have to earn your right to be still by proving your productivity. This is the deepest, most persistent habit of the keeper who fears the frost. But remember that the earth does not require a report of your labor before it allows you to sleep. Your body, your mind, and your heart are not machines that must be kept running at maximum capacity to be considered valuable. They are living, organic things that require cycles of activity and cycles of deep, restorative rest. When you allow yourself to stop, even for 10 minutes, to simply breathe and be, you are not being lazy. You are being wise. You are tending to the roots. Perhaps you are pretending to be okay, smiling while you feel heavy, or carrying a sense of being not enough like a cold stone in your pocket. You don't have to carry it all. You can be honest with yourself, even if you aren't ready to be honest with the world. You can sit with your own heaviness and say, I am carrying a lot today. And that is all right. You can acknowledge your struggle without building a fortress around it. You can be both the person who is struggling and the person who is holding the struggle with compassion. This practice of return, of coming back to the present moment, back to the feeling of the breath, back to the awareness that you are safe here in your own skin, is something you can do 100 times a day. You don't need a special room, or a soft cushion, or an hour of silence. You can do it in the line at the store. You can do it while you are waiting for a train. You can do it while you are walking from one task to another. It is a tiny internal pivot. It is the act of dropping the saw and opening your hands. When you feel the pull to react with anger, or the urge to defend your position, or the desperate need to prove your point, notice the gardener's reflex. Notice how your body braces itself, how your breath becomes short, how the world narrows down to a point of conflict. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to respond with total enlightened grace. Just the act of noticing the reflex is a form of transformation. It is the beginning of the end of your unconscious, automatic living. You are learning to treat your life with a different kind of care. It is a care that acknowledges the reality of the season, whatever that season may be. If it is a time of harvest, you gather the fruit with gratitude. If it is a time of drought, you sit with the reality of the lack without adding the extra stinging salt of self-blame. You are becoming a person who can move through the world with an open heart, even when the wind is blowing, even when the ground is cold, even when the path is obscured by the fog of uncertainty. This is not a destination, it is a practice. You will forget, and you will return to the habit of gripping, and you will feel the weight of the saw in your hand again. This is not a failure. It is simply another part of the cycle. Each time you notice that you have returned to the old way, you have an opportunity to begin again. You can see the habit, you can name the gardener, and you can gently set the tool back on the shelf. You are building a new relationship with yourself, one small moment at a time. Imagine the feeling of walking through your day with this new understanding. Imagine what it would be like to experience a mistake, not as a permanent label on your character, but as a single knot in a very long, very complex tapestry. You would still see the knot, and you would still feel the frustration, but it would no longer feel like a catastrophe. It would just be a part of the design. You could work around it, you could learn from it, and you could continue to weave. You don't need to be afraid of the future, because you are finally learning to be home in the present. You don't need to fear the uncertainty of tomorrow, because you are building a deep internal trust that you can meet whatever the season brings. You are becoming the mountain, the terrace, and the quiet witness of your own unfolding life. And in this place, there is a peace that passes all understanding. As we move toward the final moments of this journey, let yourself settle into the awareness of your own breath. You have done the work of witnessing, and that is enough. You are in a safe space, in a quiet room, and the night is here to hold you. You don't have to solve your whole life tonight. You don't have to fix the orchard, or fill the basin, or weave the perfect tapestry. You only have to exist, here, in this moment, and let the rest fall away into the deep, dark comfort of the earth. Everything is waiting for you in the morning, and it will be there, exactly as it needs to be. But for now, the work is done. You are allowed to be still. You are allowed to be empty. You are allowed to be at peace. The mountain air outside the hut is growing colder now, a thin and bracing frost that settles upon the high terraces. It does not feel like a threat. It feels like a blanket. The trees have stopped their reaching, their branches held still against the vast, dark velvet of the night sky. In this profound stillness, the work of the orchard is done. There is no fruit to be gathered, no branch to be pruned, and no water to be measured in the clay basin. Everything has been allowed to return to the earth, to rest in the quiet security of the roots. You can feel this same stillness moving through your own body. Your hands, which have held the saw for so long, are finally soft and open. Your heart, which has been trying to manage the entire season, is slowing to match the rhythm of the mountain. There is no longer a need to be the keeper of your own worth. There is no longer a need to protect yourself from the winter of your own humanity. You have placed your worries into the basin. You have looked at the knots in your own tapestry, and you have acknowledged that you are exactly what you are supposed to be. Let the weight of your body sink deeper into the support beneath you. Feel the mattress as if it were the fertile, ancient soil of the terrace, holding you, warming you, and asking nothing of you but that you finally stop trying to move. The thoughts that have been circling like birds above the orchard are tired of flying. They are landing, one by one, in the dark safety of the branches. You don't have to watch them anymore. You don't have to keep them fed. You can let the night take care of the orchard while you slip into the quiet space where all stories finally dissolve. There is a gentle, rhythmic quality to the darkness. It is like the slow pulse of a tide, or the deep, steady breathing of the mountain itself. You are not losing your consciousness. You are merely letting it rest. You are drifting toward the place where the gardener and the garden become one, where there is no separation between the one who tends and the one who is tended. The cold of the frost is just the surface of the world inside. There is the warm, steady, pulsing life that has always been here, untouched by the drought and unburdened by the harvest. Think of the clay basin, sitting on its stone table in the dark. It is no longer a tool of measurement. It is just a vessel, resting in the quiet, catching the silence as if it were the softest of mountain mists. You are that basin. You are the space that holds the night. You are the peace that exists when the pruning saw is hidden away, and the frantic need to be perfect has been laid to rest. The mountain does not worry that the trees are bare. The moon does not worry that the valley is in shadow. And you, dear listener, do not need to worry that you have not solved your life. The knots in your tapestry are not going anywhere, and that is a relief. They are the history of your growth, the proof of your engagement with the world, and they will wait for you until you are ready to look at them again. But tonight, they do not need to be examined. Tonight the loom is silent, the thread is still. The weaver is simply a person, lying in the dark, breathing in the vast, ancient mercy of the night. You are permitted to stop being the one who keeps watch. You are permitted to stop being the one who explains. You are permitted to finally be the one who is held. The air in the room is cool and clear. It touches your skin with a soft, weightless grace. Each time you exhale, a little more of the day's effort leaves you. It leaves through your fingers, through your toes, through the muscles in your neck and your back. You are shedding the identity of the orchard keeper. You are shedding the weight of the saw. You are shedding the need to know. to have, and to do. You are becoming as quiet as the stone in the hand of the weaver, as still as the trees in the heart of the winter. There is a light somewhere that does not come from a lamp or a sun. It is the steady, inner light of awareness that has been watching the mountain all along. It has seen the drought, and it has seen the bloom, and it has never once judged the season. It has always known that you were enough. It has always known that the knots and the fruit and the empty branches are all just part of the same beautiful unfolding existence. And this light is with you now. It is the peace that remains when all the thinking has finally stopped. The mountain is vast, the night is deep, and you are tucked safely into the center of it. There is no tomorrow asking for your labor, and there is no yesterday asking for your correction. The orchard is sleeping, the mountain is dreaming, and in the center of it all you are finding the home that was never lost. Only forgotten, you are sinking into the earth, deep and heavy and free. The silence is not an emptiness that needs to be filled. It is the foundation that holds all of life. And tonight, it is holding you. What if the quiet you have been waiting for was not something to be earned, but the very earth you were always standing on?